morning, everyone. I want to note many things, but I especially want to note that it's time to say happy birthday to Amanda. So, and in recognition of her birthday and other factors, we would like to, when we get to the point of adjusting agenda, we will move the taxation item to be the first item to be discussed. So if someone who's going to move agenda keeps that in mind. Emergency evacuation procedures. If there is an emergency, we will leave by the exit doors and safely outside, gather at the gazebo and wait for staff or authorities to allow us back in. And if those exits aren't available, we have the exits directly behind me to exit the building as well. The security at the municipal government building procedure overview. That's the one we are going to. Where is my adoption of agenda? That's below that. Isn't that a bit? I didn't catch that. No, is that meant to be in that order still? Okay. Security at the municipal government building procedure overview. Who is taking that one? Okay. Thank you, Jolene. Okay, and we.
Presentation that went along with that. Yep. If anyone hadn't got to that. Yeah. All of it.
Report.
Again, this isn't really officially part of it. I did send out that email last week with a little heads up on it. Please read that section. So that was a test. We will practice this. It could come from myself if I'm in the room. It could come from Jolene, whoever. But if you hear that command, basically it's because Jolene's sitting in that section and has a good view of the doors. That's where that command would come from. If it's maybe the crowd is already here in the building, they're getting a little bit rowdy, it could come from the mayor or whoever's sitting in the chair seat. And basically that's it. Just get behind those secure doors as quick as you can. And staff and everybody gets through those secure doors over there. So we're running interference for you. They have to, tackle us and stomp all over top of us before they get to you. Anyway, I think that was the test right there.
Okay, thank you, Ron. And repeating what happened, that was the security at the municipal government building procedure overview, basically a practice run of going into a safe zone. Mayor Henson?
I just had a question. Would we only use that in a really, I wasn't sure the definition of unruly. Would that be used in really severe situations only? Or is that something that would be used to de-escalate something in council chambers that was not, we've had situations. It was not I didn't feel in danger, certainly during then, but is this something that we're recommended to use in a situation like that to calm the waters, or is there a stage in between?
Yes, Ms. Phillips?
I think this would be more used in an emergency situation if it was a safety concern, which could be a patron or a resident is really aggressive and there's that fear that it's escalating quickly. But if it was just wanting to just calm the room, I would suggest you would call a recess and just take that break and then just have that everyone still leave, I think, immediately. So you call a recess and it's, you know, if that's the situation, everyone should leave the room and go to the back immediately and allow the situation to settle. So it would be that judgment call though, right? So, yeah. If you ever even thought a little bit that it was unsafe, just call it. Look, everyone to the safe room. That adjourns the meeting, or recesses the meeting instantly and we just move back. Good?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Phillips. Seeking a mover for adoption of an amended agenda. Tim, Councillor Mearns.
I make a motion to adopt the amended agenda, moving item C up to item A.
All those in favor? Carried unanimously. All right, we will start with item C, found on page 96.
Thank you very much for that. That's a very nice thing to do. It's been a while since I've been at Committee of the Whole, so I will be less formal and working that into my brain here. So tonight, I'm bringing forward the non-residential tax incentive bylaw for discussion. And we're looking to seek council's feedback on the development of this bylaw to advance the strategic priority of positioning the town as a preferred location for business investment. The purpose of the non-residential tax incentive is to encourage industrial development that will result in increased tax revenue for the town and create skilled jobs in the long term. The town of Sylvan Lake is considering the development of the non-residential tax incentive. The incentive aims to stimulate economic growth, attract investment, encourage business development, and create job opportunities. The topic aims to support non-residential property owners and businesses by reducing their tax burden during times of new growth and expansion. The program would help businesses become more sustainable over the long term and assist in growing the town's non-residential tax base. We brought this topic forward for discussion on February 7th, 2024, and required some additional time to really understand the topic and review it before bringing it back for another round. During that time, we had an interdepartmental team working on the bylaw. We discussed the considerations for the municipality and the businesses with our legal counsel, Brownlee, as well as participated in a couple of presentations that the law firm did for municipal government on this particular program. You have received a supplemental exemption example tonight. I thought that would be an easier way to kind of kick us off so you can kind of see what we're talking about. I am going to put it up on the screen here for everyone in the audience, and we can go through it together, and then we'll get to the rest of the report. So this is a simple example of the tax exemption and how it would work. I'm just going to eat the microphone here. I know I talk a little low. In this example, we're looking at a vacant property with no buildings on it yet. So this would be our new construction example. So in box 1, we have the pre-project property value. And the property value that we've selected for this pre-project example is $500,000. And you can see that the amount of tax collected on the right-hand side in box 1 is just over $8,000. In box 2, you can see that some stuff has happened to the property. Probably a building has been built on it. And this would be the post-project or after the completion of the project is finalized. And the improvement to the property, the new building construction, was an additional $300,000. And you can see that the property tax amount to be collected has increased with that increase in property value. And it's increased to $13,000. Calculating the exemption on this amount means that we look at that increased value of $300,000 and we multiply it by the municipal portion of the tax rate. And we get that municipal portion of the tax rate by taking the regular tax rate and subtracting the portions for school and lodge. We do that because those portions aren't up to us to collect, so we have to remit those no matter what. So we wouldn't want to include those in the incentive because we don't have control over paying them or the monies that get collected there. Then the municipal exemption percentage is applied, and you'll see that it's 75% is what's being proposed. And the total exemption amount that would be added to the tax bill annually for the period of the exemption is $2,776.05 in this example. Going down to box 4, you can see the tax bill amount of $13,000 in year 1 and the exemption amount removed of $2,776 for the total tax collected. Using the exemption would be just over $10,000. And over the 3-year, which is the proposed term for the exemption, the amount that we wouldn't be collecting would be just over $8,000 over the 3-year term. So that just gives a little bit of an example just to showcase what this could look like. The amounts in here were selected because they align with the amounts that would be required for a person to be considered under the bylaw. So $250,000 would be the minimum amount that their assessment would have to increase in order to receive qualification for the exemption under the new building part. If it was an expansion, that would be a $50,000 increase in the property tax assessment to be able to qualify for the incentive. Heading back over to the report. So there's a couple of ways that a non-residential tax incentive can be applied. This example has shown an exemption. There's also the option of a deferral or a rebate. An exemption is added to the tax bill, so there's less back and forth with the business owner and the municipality, which creates less friction in the process and less money spent on administrative costs for the program overall. And it's the most efficient, as we've discussed. Deferrals mean that the business or the owner of the property would pay the taxes later. This option is okay. It has a little more, there's a little more complexity to it, meaning that you have to collect the tax and it's got to be put into a lien on the property to make sure that we don't lose it if the property sells or the business goes under or something like this happens. It's not the most efficient option for the business and doesn't provide, while it provides immediate tax relief, it doesn't provide that relief that helps them through those beginning stages as well as an exemption does. Rebate is the third option, and rebates are like refunds on your taxes. So you pay everything up front and then you get the rebate back. This option is okay, again, but it doesn't do anything for the business who is trying to get through those beginning stages and maybe needs to have the extra cash on hand. We looked at considerations from the business side and from the municipal side, and we thought about a lot of different things and how each side would see the incentive and how they would want to use it. When I think about the business side, I think about an investor, particularly a new investor coming into the community, and how they're making decisions on which community to go with. And when I think about this, I'm not thinking about Sylvan Lake and Innisfail and our close neighbors. I'm thinking about properties in Alberta and properties in somewhere like the US or other provinces. So our main competition isn't necessarily our neighbors here, it's those other provinces and other countries that are our competition that I think about when I think about investment attraction and bringing people to our community. And they're looking for a number of things. They want to have the right number of employees that have the right skills. They want to have the right mix of infrastructure on the property that they need for their particular business, and that changes with every business. and several other factors. And I sort of envision them sort of lining up all these needs that they have and doing check boxes. And at the end of the day, selecting the community that has the most check boxes. This program, while it's not a gigantic amount of money that we're giving up, it is a checkbox, an additional checkbox. So when a community has the same amount of stuff or of those like super needs, like employees, infrastructure, the right property size, when there's a bunch of those lined up, what are the things that are going to matter to the business if everything else is equal? And things like quality of life, you know, living here by the lake, incentives, easy to work with as a municipality, ease of getting permits and ease of knowing who you're talking to and having that kind of concierge service. Those are the things that are going to tip the scales in our favor. And I'd like us to have all the things that we can check off, all those boxes that we can check off for them, kind of available to them, as many as we can. And that's one of the reasons this program makes some sense. It's not the amount of money that they'd be getting back, it's more the ability to say, we're open for business, we're here, we've checked off this box of we have an incentive, and we want you to come here, we want you to look at us, and maybe you're looking at us because we had one more box in the next community that we were looking at. Now that I've completely lost my place. So I think I've covered all of that. On the municipal considerations, we've discussed that we'd only be applying the incentive to the municipal portion of the tax bill. Who can access the incentive? So for this incentive, we're looking at placing it in the industrial area only. And we can expand that in time, and we can expand it now if council wishes to. But the reason we chose the industrial area is because we have a lot of industrial lands in the future development category, and some that are almost planned and almost ready for development that we hope to sort of tip the scales on, or be able to attract, you know, enough businesses to fill up our current properties, and then hopefully that will encourage the developers that own those other pieces of property to further develop them. The incentive program works. How does the incentive program work? So a bylaw is established that governs the program. That bylaw is up to council to repeal or change, and the program will be administered according to that bylaw. The bylaw gives administration the authority to enter into agreements with landowners to facilitate the incentive. So once incentive agreements are in place, those agreements are in place no matter what happens to the bylaw. But the agreements can only be made because the bylaw exists. We talked a little bit about deferrals or exemptions. We prefer the tax exemption over the tax deferral for the following reasons. Exemptions provide the quickest, most meaningful benefit for investment attraction, and exemptions are the easiest form of the incentive to administer, making them less of a burden on the taxpayer. Deferrals provide the least value to the business because they still end up having to pay the taxes and have that kind of hanging in their future. In the bylaw, we talk about an exemption period. That's the period of time that they'll be receiving the exemption. The province sets out that the exemption period can be up to 15 consecutive years. We've chosen a 3-year period as a starting point. It's up to us as the town to determine what the appropriate length of time we would like to offer. Council can also determine if an incentive can be renewed after the term is finished on the initial agreement. So what we're proposing is a 3-year exemption period with a 75% reduction in the municipal tax portion of the tax bill. This includes the amounts for the recreation and transportation levies, so those aren't excluded from that. That's part of the municipal portion. It's the lodge and the school, thank you. Lodge and the school that are not included in the exemption amount. The exemption was established at 75% to ensure that any increase in operating costs related to the subject property is funded by the remaining 25%. Moving the exemption amount to 100% of the municipal portion is not going to break the bank. It's something that can be discussed. We felt that 75% was a great place to start and is a fair amount. Additional details of the program are outlined in the bylaw. That was the highlights I thought we could share and start discussing today. The resource impacts for this project are staff time to implement and track the program's progress. And this aligns with council's strategic direction, their strategic priority of positioning the town as the preferred location for business investment. And it also aligns with the corporate plan deliverable of investigate incentive programs for non-residential development. Communication strategies will of course be created in alignment with any development of the bylaw and rollout of the program. The request of council today is just to have a bit of a conversation about the program and ultimately land on, is this something that we're interested in pursuing, that we feel like would be a good opportunity for our community to add more of those boxes that we can check off for developers when they're looking at the program or at our community.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mercer. Thinking about some key topics that are in this report, maybe we can all take a chance to speak to some of them. Maybe I can even ask, as people make their initial thoughts, to just say one of the key areas to decide on the exemption, you know, the model of exemption or deferral or lost my third word, the rebate, and then we can go with another round looking at the number of years and percentages potentially, and a third area was the industrial and maybe other areas, like downtown core was one that was suggested in the report. Does that seem fair to everybody, just to break it up a bit? Okay, I see. Let's start with Mayor Hansen as a feedback.
I support it exactly as presented in all areas.
Councillor Dakin?
Okay. I support the tax exemption for sure. Can I just hammer it out? Because I have everything
Yeah,
pretty
sure,
organized
if you
in my
have
head.
quick thoughts.
Thank
yeah.
you. Yes, tax exempt. I think that for most businesses, we need 5 years to get that real momentum and get our legs in the ground. So I would like to see specifically this. 100% if we're going to do 3 years, 75% but for 5 years. And I would actually like to see this everywhere. There's all kinds of businesses that can come to town. Unfortunately, major industry might not be one of them. And if we're going to put something out there, I'd want to see any kind of business coming to town. And yeah, touched it all.
Okay. Councillor Mearns?
Yeah, I had the exact same thoughts as Councillor Dakin on the, you know, if we're going to do 75%, then we do it over 5 years. And if we're going to do 100, we would do 3 years. And I would like to see it everywhere as well, and the tax exemption. So,
Councillor Parsons?
I like the 75%, but I'd still, I'd like to at least start with the industrial area. That's where most of them have started that I've known on tax exemption. So, the industrial area, and I like the 3 years to start with.
Councillor Payne?
I'm split because it sounds very reasonable the way it's laid out, but I do see the reasoning behind going with 5 years. I don't agree with the only the industrial area, because I do think that a lot of the businesses that are going to be coming to town, that we're hoping to come to town, are in newly developed areas. Our newly developed areas are popping up everywhere right now. So I think if we're going to do this, I would like to see it all over town. I'm not 100% sure about the 100% though. Like that's, I have a little bit of an issue.
I was jokingly going to say, can we turn this, are we able to pass this in 3 motions tonight? So generally, I like the, I say I support this notion of the tax incentive, definitely the exemption, and expanding the number of years, I think I can entertain as well, you know, doing the 75 for a longer period of time, 4 or 5 years. I was imagining how could this also address, you know, we're trying to always target the downtown and then thinking, is that fair? But knowing that, yeah, we have this need to incentivize basically the redevelopment of a tougher area. It's easier always to do things on clean land. But I thought just downtown, when we had just finished the whole waterfront reworking and thinking about all these mixed uses we want along all of these commercial corridors in the waterfront area, thinking I wouldn't want to just see the downtown. If we were going to do it, I would want to see a bit more of an expanded role. But then I had the difficulty in my mind earlier of saying, where would the border be? Is it just that waterfront area? Because in my sense of, oh, what about just up 50th? What about here? What about there? So I was a bit conflicted with the idea of where would I draw a clean line and be fair in my mind about incentivizing. So summarizing, if I didn't make myself clear, love the idea for the industrial area. I accept this idea of going a little bit farther. I am uncertain about how far I want to expand it over the whole town. That's where I'm trying to think about how we're trying to strategize and incentivize the rebirth of our core. And Ms. Mercer, maybe you want to add thoughts to guiding us.
I would love to. So when we think about expanding the program outside of the industrial area, I try to think of like myself as a car salesperson. And our goal is to generate some tax revenue in the community to pay for some stuff. And there's certain areas of the community that are going to fill up anyway. And those areas are new developments. And the downtown, you're right, might need some help at some point to get kind of going. But we're starting to see some redevelopment happening or coming in down there as well. So when I think about areas that, like a good starting point focus area, that's where the industrial area came in. And I don't know, Kim, if you wanted to provide some additional context into why we chose the industrial area as a good starting point for this.
Sure, thank you, Amanda. We looked at Council's strategic plan, and again, we were strategic. If you're going to implement an incentive program, there must be a really clear reason why we're doing this. So Council was clear, they wanted to see increased non-residential development with a specific focus on the industrial area. That was our interpretation from the strat plan. So that's why we focused on the industrial area as the primary area that we thought this should be applied to. Secondly, we did talk about downtown as well, because revitalizing downtown is also on the priority list. So again, it would make sense that there could be incentivization that could happen there. As Amanda indicated, we did not consider the rest of the business areas because, one, incentives aren't necessarily designed to be fair. They're designed to be strategic to achieve your goals. And the goal is to incentivize those areas where we want to see development that's not currently occurring happen in a faster manner. So new neighborhoods like the Vistas and Crestview and Beacon Hill, for example, they're already seeing those small pockets of commercial coming. We don't have to incentivize them. So all we're doing is losing out on tax revenue that we can otherwise utilize to be fiscally responsible to balance out the residential taxes that we're collecting. I know it's not a big amount of taxes that are being waived, but again, I don't think it needs to be fair. And actually, when we spoke to the lawyers, they highly recommended, they said not to put it in place for the entire commercial, non-residential areas of the community. That's not typically what these are designed for. So that was how we based our justification and why, we're strongly recommending at least focusing on the industrial area and then considering other areas from there.
Actually, I wrote in my own notes, greater than or equal to 50 years old subdivision, thinking about those are the places we're trying to re-incentivize. that was one of my wrestlings in my mind before this meeting, to say, how would I create a border? Councillor Mearns.
Yeah, and when I think of it, maybe instead of the whole town, I would say north of the tracks. That encompasses downtown, where we're seeing a little bit of revitalization, but I would entertain that instead of saying the whole town.
Okay. Councillor Dakin?
Yeah, I agree with Kim's oh my gosh.
Focus.
Focus, yes. I agree now. Yeah, I can see the point of that. So I'd be okay doing industrial, and I can see the downtown already deteriorating and getting a little bit, yeah, it needs it. So for sure, north of tracks works for me too.
Any other thoughts on, since the fuzzy part for us in the discussion has been just those other areas, any other input on the other areas? Councillor?
No other
Parsons?
areas. Now that I get the gist of it, the long-term tax incentives that I've heard through my life has always been industrial area. But you're right, downtown, we've tried numerous things to kickstart downtown. And I always just thought the lake would kickstart downtown, and it may still, but if we're gonna put something in, maybe the downtown core and industrial, but nothing further.
Any other input? So I think I'm just recall if I've added all my thoughts to it before I check with Ms. Mercer. Yeah, the thinking of the comments about, you know, north of the tracks, or that would encompass some of those oldest parts of town for sure. When I thought about the oldest, also I was thinking about those mixed use corridors we're trying to create, incentivizing that new vision of the waterfront. So that's where my mind was going a bit with the non-industrial areas.
I just have one point of clarity for that downtown area. Because it is mixed use, the only part that would be allowed to be incentivized through this program would be the commercial portion of the building. So just be mindful of that. And we may need to discuss as a team what that would look like in terms of those incentive levels, because they are based on increased and assessed value. So if we had a building that was tore down and replaced, that would probably maybe qualify because there's a building on the property already. So there's some value there, and according to our tax assessment rule. So there'd be some more discussions on how that piece would shake out, and it's a little more complex to calculate that incentive because of the mixed use component.
Okay. Any other question you have to draw anything out from us? Or to me it sounds like we have a solid desire to see this again and to come to an approval of an industrial area. And it sounds like we need maybe a little more guidance and research on the other possible commercial zones, but seems like there's a stronger focus on the older, north of the tracks, mixed potential areas.
So what I'm hearing is, 5 years at 75% seems to be the majority of where people are sitting. Is there a show of hands at 5 years, 75%?
Could that people show thumbs up if the 5 years, 75% could work?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm hearing that we're all okay with the industrial area. Is that true?
Yeah.
And then I'm hearing that how many want something in the downtown right away as part of the first program? So we're sort of
Or at least some recommendation for it.
Okay.
Not 100% there, but definitely a
That
desire.
provides some good clarity, I think.
Councillor Dakin has a question too. Yeah, carry on then.
I'm okay. I'm
Oh,
good.
okay.
I think so. I was going to look around the room and see if anyone was trying to jab me with their eyeballs, but I don't see anything.
I was wondering if it would be possible to know what somebody else that would be a close competitor to us is doing exactly. So we have that competitive edge, just that little bit ahead of them. Could we have a comparable?
Trina put together a list of comparables the last time, and they're all over the map. So I can definitely show you that list of comparables. I think there's like 15 communities on the list and kind of what they're doing. And it really just depends on the community's makeup and what sort of industries are there and what they're incentivizing. So like up north in oil sands country, Grand Prairie is doing like gazillion-dollar incentive program to attract business there for different things versus somewhere like Bonnyville is doing something quite small.
Right.
So it sort of fluctuates based on what they're expecting to attract.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
For sure. I was just thinking maybe like, why would a pea plant go to Innisfail instead of Sylvan Lake? I know they're on the highway, but how can we get that much more,
Then, okay.
That's what I'm more curious about. How do we get them from our neighbors to us? Are they doing anything? That kind of question?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I think Innisfil's on that list. But yeah, we can look at our close neighbors too.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Mercer, then.
Thank you very much.
Our next item found on page 3, Alberta Munis resolutions. And Ms. Reynolds will lead us on that.
I will take that.
Oh, switching names. Yeah.
This was a request that it come up on our council agendas, and it's really just an opportunity. We asked ahead of time if council had any ideas. This is our time to bring it back. I believe it was also circulated to administration, and no immediate suggestions came up. So we're just really taking the pause to make sure we haven't missed anything. If we want to bring it forward, it is within the next couple of weeks that we'd have to submit that. So this is our opportunity, council. If there's something you think we should put on the table as an advocacy item to put forward a resolution, but I personally do not have any. I just wanted to make sure we had the space for it.
Yeah. And when I thought about it, neither did I. I didn't come up with any ideas. We did several just last year, so we put ourselves on that map for sure. Okay. All right. That concludes that,
and then I guess my follow-up request I would just say is once the package comes forward, I do always appreciate that we have the chance to also add that to a committee of the whole to do a bit of a review with some administrative feedback on some of the resolutions before we head into vote. We did that last year. We were provided with a great document that gave us some feedback on it, and I'd love to have that scheduled again whenever those, September maybe it was, but and actually with an election, it might be after the election, but before the convention, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Hansen. Seeing no other comments, we will move to the page 21 on our agenda, the Sylvan Lake IDP, Intermunicipal Development Plan, action item prioritization. So there's a few items that were in the short-term list, and we want to give them priorities. Ms. Devlin will be back in a moment, and she will lead us through part of the discussion. And we'll just pause a moment, time. So we take a, Councillor Mearns.
Just an update, 1-0 Edmonton.
Oh, all right. Good to hear.
You're not paying attention.
Probably has an alarm going off in the pocket. Thank you for the update too.
I just have one of those gold lights. Wouldn't it be a fun trick if that was just stuck somewhere in council chambers?
advocacy priority is care. Councillor Rilling, that was fast. But Mayor Hansen, you usually back Councillor Rilling.
I am, but they are all submitted through my committee reports. There was nothing outside of that.
Okay, so we'll touch on that later if needed. Tourism-based community, Councillor Mearns.
Yeah, so the only thing I have is during FCM, attended a Travel Canada presentation. And what I learned from that, went to the presentation and then had some time to spend with Travel Canada on their new toolkit that they've released to help communities in tourism. And what I realized through that and talking through the program with them and going through it is we're on the right track and we're working with the right departments and working with Travel Alberta and Tourism Industry Association of Alberta. And so it was just nice to know that we're ahead of that toolkit that Travel Canada's put together. So it was just a nice aha moment that we're working in the right direction. So that's all I have.
And one question, that was Travel Canada that produced that toolkit?
It's a toolkit,
okay.
yeah.
Oops. The third advocacy item, new high school, Councillor Payne.
Nothing official to report, but I've had two separate conversations with MLAs who are, one is our MLA and another one is from Southern Alberta, who asked me about the conversations. So I know it's a conversation that's being had outside of our conversations. We have a new superintendent in Chinook's Edge who started on June 1st, and he is very much focused on this as well. So that's kind of where we sit. It's a time of year where I don't think a heck of a lot is going on as far as conversations go with summer approaching. But I do think that come the fall, things will pick up because it seems to be on everyone's radar. So even our MLA at Grad made a point of making it one of his talking points. So
good. Yeah. Okay, that concludes our advocacy priority discussion. We'll jump into our IDP, Intermunicipal Development Plan, action item prioritization. Ms. Devlin, if you want to guide us through that prioritization and the needs for it.
Great, thank you, Councillor Oostende. I apologize for my exit there. I did go to get some handouts for you, so I will just Thank you, Jolene. Good evening, Council. So today we're going to talk about the IDP action prioritization. At the last IDP meeting, they had requested that municipalities have a look at some of the short-term priorities that were listed in the plan and identify which ones were considered priorities for councils so they could utilize them for their planning at the IDPC level. So I'll try to move us through this as quickly as I can. Just to give you a summary of the implementation section, which I did give you the shortcut to that version, so you don't have to refer to the large document. There are 5 immediate actions that are identified, so these are 1 to 2 year completion items. We have completed 4 of the 5 of them. However, the 5th one, we are adhering to the 30-meter setback for tributaries in the lake. So it's not something that we're necessarily outstanding on, but we're still adhering to the requirements of it. There are 9 short-term actions, which are 1 to 10 year timeframes. So Typically, 10 years is considered a long-term time frame. In this case, with 8 partners, it is a short-term time frame, and there are 4 long-term actions that are 11 to 20 years. We're not going to discuss those ones in terms of prioritization, just because I don't think it makes a lot of sense to prioritize them. At this point, we'll just focus on the short-term ones. So there are 9 actions listed in the plan. I did highlight them for you in yellow on your implementation sheet. And what I'll do is I will walk council through each of those items if you'd like, just because there was a lot of policy in that IDP document. I don't anticipate that anyone will be familiar with those. So the first one, policy 627A, is interim environmentally significant areas mapping. So this action, it says that partner municipalities should develop an interim inventory of environmentally significant areas in the plan area when appropriate data sets are available. This interim inventory will consider potential environmentally sensitive areas, wildlife corridors, and natural areas. The interim inventory will be constructed using the following databases, and they have a series of databases, provincially available databases that can be utilized. What I will say about this one is that we do have our natural areas management plan already completed. It does identify our ESAs within town. So from our end of things, we do have this information already detailed for our community. This plan, the accountability is a collective partnership it has identified rather than an individual municipal one. However, I will say, to me, it seems like it reads like it's an individual one and not necessarily a group one. So I would say we have our information and data sets already collected that could be incorporated into a larger document, looking at the fact that they have a medium budget associated with this, which is $50,000 to $150,000. I would expect that they'd be looking at creating a regional plan of environmentally significant areas with this. So that's what this one is. And if you have any questions, please stop me. Otherwise, we'll wait and you guys can discuss your thoughts on prioritization, unless you'd like to do it sooner.
Any questions?
Okay, second one.
No? Okay, looks like no questions on that one.
All right. Is the development of specific development setbacks for natural tributaries. So the partner municipalities are encouraged to assess and identify specific development setbacks for each naturally occurring Sylvan Lake tributary within the plan area. We have Golf Course Creek is our only natural tributary that runs through our municipality. And our West Area Structure Plan, where it does run through, identifies that a 30-meter setback is required. Now again, if someone wanted to build within that area, they would have to have a consultant review it and do a plan identifying or stating that it won't have any negative impacts to the water course. So there's a lot of work that someone would have to do. What this is saying is that if you're going to allow setbacks of a lesser distance, you can determine what those are going to be. I know Lacombe County has done some work on this, and it was a very complex process based on slope, based on soil types, based on a whole bunch of things. And it was different for almost every parcel, depending on how close they were, the whole series of criteria that they used to evaluate. I don't know if that's necessary for us to go to that extent, especially if we're hoping to preserve that 30-meter setback to the greatest extent possible as a green belt through the community or that type of thing. It is identified for individual municipalities to undertake, and it does have an estimated low budget requirement. And again, we could go to the effort of trying to detail, something again, depending on, really, we have about 2 quarter sections that it would apply to at this time. One that's not planned, undeveloped, north of 60 West, and the other one is the golf course. So again, no development anticipated at the golf course at this time, but we could do that exercise for the 1 quarter section that does exist.
Yeah. I have a question about that. I consider that one of my personal favorites in terms of prioritization. And how do we wrestle with, because I have actually, in my own personal life, have gone through that process of engineering closer than the 30 meters to water, because the land was already developed. It was about reparations of sewage treatment, close to open water. And it's, you know, I understand it's complex, et cetera, but went through the process successfully, et cetera. But, you know, really my house should have never been in that place within the distance of water. However, we have property rights. So how do we, as a community, advocate for our future developments to truly not engineer to that water edge? Because we've done that at Greyhawk. I always use that as an example. You know, within a meter of the creek, the culvert empties. And I know it's engineered and we shouldn't be worried about it. But what we've lost then is the other advantages to being protective of nature is the economic possibilities of regional parks, the green space of our town, and advantages of stormwater treatment, et cetera, being buffered by these natural zones. And so we have all these other engineering and economic factors to make sure that in the future we continue this 30-meter minimum principle. And right now we only have those quarters, but there's another quarter and another quarter that will be annexed one day. And I'm positive before I'm dead, not that long in our future. And so how do we, as a community, have any effect on that? Or is it just, we've just got to come to the table with tons of money and buy people's rights out? Where is it? Yeah.
Well, I think to answer that, when the IDP was completed and these regulations were put in, that there should be collectively an agreed to 30-meter setback wherever possible. Again, as you've indicated, developed lands, so right along the lake, is much more challenging to maintain that than it's going to be in the one quarter where the creek runs through, that we don't have any development occurring. We did amend our MDP, so it does state that a 30-meter setback is required. Now there is a clause in there that says, you know, unless a professional evaluates it and determines that a lesser setback is appropriate. And we felt that was important to put in there because there are some of those properties. The one that comes to mind is right next to the golf course, right where the creek outlets into Marina Bay. There is a one parcel there with a house on it. That they couldn't redevelop that site if we didn't give them some provisions recognizing it's already been developed and disturbed. So it probably makes sense to allow future redevelopment of that site in a similar capacity. The West Area Structure Plan, as I mentioned, also indicates a 30-meter setback is required. And so when the developer, when they come in the future to prepare an outline plan for that quarter section, that's going to be a big negotiating piece. And you know, we can require them. Our policies state that they need to have a 30-meter setback. In some areas that might be really easy to maintain, and in other areas it might not make sense to fully maintain that. I can't say I don't know what will happen there, but we do have policies that state that. And that groundwork is already laid so that if anyone was to come in, they can't say they didn't know or that we're changing the rules on them. So I think we do have some sort of firm footing to state these are environmentally significant areas, and we can go to some lengths to protect those without having to purchase them.
So what I'm understanding then is in the places that are completely undeveloped, and I mean they're developed as farms, but they're undeveloped, we have the ability now then to maintain the 30 meters unless we have a development right on. In other words, like a house you pointed out at near the mouth of the creek. Yeah, and so Greyhawk came in before that time, and same with 60 West. Like I know they're on their development plans, they have a stormwater retention pond expected right where the old gas plant is running on there. That would be the northeast corner of their development. I think it's phase 10 to be exact, but that's really close to the creek. That they still have that right to do that then, I would assume, because they were before that time, or?
I would have to check their plan to see, again, check the setbacks and look into that. I can't give you a for sure answer at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's so many benefits to that 30-meter, not just for the tree huggers, right? I mean, there's economic, there's stormwater issues, tons of stuff that will save us millions in the future, let alone floods and all that kind of stuff. Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. The next policy is around a regional trail plan. So partner municipalities should develop a regional trail plan. The plan will address a variety of active transportation options. Primary consideration will be given to walking, cycling, and similar modes of transportation. Regional trails shall not be designed for horseback riding, ATV usage, sledding, or similar activities. Existing proposed alignments documented in the Sylvan Lake Boat Launch Access Strategy for recreational lake access. And Lacombe County's Sylvan Lake Area Structure Plan shall be considered for the regional trail plan. It's also expected to address trail alignment, trail types and dimensions, connections between the plan area, particularly connecting to both the city of Red Deer and Benalto, an implementation framework, a maintenance strategy, and stakeholder and public engagement on the project. Lake access management plan. So this policy says the partner municipality shall undertake a coordinated lake access management plan that will result in a cost sharing, benefit sharing framework, planning and development of an additional formal motorized boat launch, planning and development of a new formal non-motorized boat launch, management of informal lake access points by identifying appropriate road allowances for closure and reclamation and obtaining provincial approval, and continued engagement with residents, users, and stakeholders to develop the lake access management plan. And I will just note, when you read this, this one does seem to say that it should come first before planning the boat launch, planning the formal hand launch. It reads that way to me, at least that's my interpretation. It says it should set the stage, but council may have a different take on that. So the next one is actually two policies related to it, and this is the formal access point development. So this is Site 5P. I did print out the map just in case anyone wasn't familiar with this, and I do have a map in my slide here just to show you. Policy 727 says, should a cost sharing, benefit sharing framework be established as per the last priority I just read, a new formal lake access point will be located at Site 5P from the Sylvan Lake Boat Launch Access Strategy for Recreational Access on Lot OT Plan 1620291. So that's just west of Camp Woods, for anyone who's not familiar with there. This is the area that was identified in the boat access strategy for a series of reasons, mostly because the slope was conducive to boat launching, and a whole series of other reasons, but that's definitely one of the biggest issues around the lake with finding an appropriate access point. The other policy, 728, states that planning and development of Site 5P is expected to include, so design and planning for motorized and non-motorized access. Detailed design for the site shall be completed, including the required studies and or approvals for construction of the new boat launch, upgrading of access roads and signage leading from the closest secondary highway, and potential land use changes to support the access. The next one is the formal hand launch at Site 2F. So similarly to the motorized, the hand motorized should include cost sharing, benefit sharing framework. And at the terminus of Range Road 23, I think most people are familiar with this, next to Kusamo Crest out there, as shown on map 5, shall be formally developed as a hand launch boat site for non-motorized crafts only. Access will be managed at Site 2F to continue to provide non-motorized public access and support sufficient emergency egress to the lake as a whole. So this is the location out here. It is often used as a motorized boat launch, but it is very shallow there, so it's a tricky spot for people to launch from. Road allowance, closure, and reclamation. So prior to development of either Site 5P or 2F, lake access points, the partner municipality shall identify appropriate road allowances to be closed and reclaimed with consideration for lake emergency access, and obtain approval from Alberta Ministry of Transportation where appropriate to close road accesses for dead-end roads as per the Sylvan Lake Boat Launch Access Strategy. The next one is Joint Erosion and Sediment Control Guidelines.
This one's a lot of reading. Joint erosion and sediment control guidelines and targets shall be developed for the plan area. All construction projects, including development applications and public projects, will follow the practices outlined in the joint erosion and sediment control guidelines and targets. All construction projects with a soil disturbance area of greater than 0.4 hectares shall submit an ESC application with drawings, rules, calculations, and enforcement measures to the satisfaction of the approving authority. Individual residential sites, agricultural properties, and properties with a soil disturbance of less than 0.4 hectares are exempt from submitting an application, but shall follow best management practices. And this one was for individual municipalities to undertake. Oh, my apologies, collective partnership. However, we do have our own regulations for erosion and sediment control that we do apply to every site when it is developed. So again, we have that. I'm not sure what all the other municipalities are doing. The counties likely have well-developed policies as well around this.
Question. You see all those plastic fabrics put up to control erosion, and then years later they're still there. And I was wondering, what's the protocol for developers or the town or groups involved in that to remove those materials? How do we ascertain that litter then is removed from the landscape?
So, sorry, just for clarification.
A lot of the erosion control is got those black fences we put up. In ditches and that, I see them right on 60 West, and they're still in the ground and the grass has grown. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're past their due, but they're still there. Is there a recovery process that developers are forced to do, or whoever's doing that work?
Yeah, within town, there should be a requirement for them to reclaim that. My guess is if they're within the ditches, they're required probably to still be maintaining them out there. But I'll make a note of that to check. You said 60 West?
Yeah. And one other question just before it's going back to regional trail plan. I noticed one potential criticism of a regional trail or concern was, a trail around the lake, do we still have access to make a trail around the lake? And I realized from that people were thinking the trail would be right alongside the beach kind of idea all the way around the lake. I've never envisioned it that way myself. I always picture it as set back a quarter section or more, and that there might be spokes that come down to the lake at strategic places. So yeah, that was one of my other top priorities actually, was trail plan, but I had a different vision of it than others, I guess, in terms of how it would fit around the lake.
And I think in some places it will meander right next to the lake, and in a lot of other places it will be set back quite a ways. Yeah. And it depends when municipalities are able to acquire the land to get the trails developed and where it makes sense. So it'll likely end up being a combination of both.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
The last action is the regional water supply line offsite levy or development charges and a reassessment of the timelines around these. Partner municipalities will collaborate to develop development charges through offsite levies to fund the regional water supply line when appropriate. A reassessment of timeliness for this collaboration will be a priority during the first review of the Sylvan Lake IDP. So with that last, I will also mention that last action says limited partnership. I honestly don't know why it says limited partnership, if it's only specific for the municipalities they envision being connected to the regional water line. I'm not sure why it says it's, I think the only one that says limited partnership. It is a medium item in terms of collecting offsite levies, but typically it's tough to collect for offsite levies unless you have a very clear project and business case for the project. So collecting too far in advance runs the risk of appeals to your levy versus making sure the project is at a sustainable point where you've got cost estimates and things like that, reasonable cost estimates, and a clear projection in terms of the time frame with which you're going to build it. And I know the Water and Wastewater Commission is just in the early stages of investigating a regional water system. So that one might be one of those ones that really has to wait until they have a little bit more information, potentially. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair, and just, some discussion around council's priorities.
Okay. I hinted at some of mine. I could summarize my priorities to begin with, and people can jump in with their own priorities. Mine had a bias towards environment, I would say, with regards to preserving our overall lake integrity due to the development I see coming and current. And one is the setbacks to protect natural waterways, and I speak to that in terms of just our town and encouraging all municipalities to that priority. But development setbacks, a regional trail plan, and the erosion sediment, which is critical, especially in an urban environment. I raise that one as a very high one because what goes down the street in the rainwater is actually not very clean. It's the residues of cars, from oil to the rubber that wears off on our tires. And I never knew how dangerous it was until they found tons of salmon dead in West Vancouver based on washed off rubber from the streets of West Vancouver going into the creeks and killing salmon. So I didn't realize how toxic car rubber is, and I always thought, oh, it must be the oil that's bad, but not so much. So the urban environment isn't as clean as we think, and even just sediment isn't good for creeks and waterways for spawning of fish, et cetera, but there's plenty of toxins as well in our urban dust. So I raise that one myself very high. The regional trail plan is great recreation, great regional development, tourism, recreation of residents. I think it's an awesome one, and the longer it delays, I know that's why they put it as a short-term goal. I think it has to be raised as a higher priority so that we don't lose the opportunities as lands get more and more tied up and then suddenly realize, no, a trail never will work. It's kind of like high-speed rail. You know, the more and more we develop on our transportation corridor, the harder it's ever going to be to have high-speed rail through Alberta, because we'd have to buy out millions of dollars of companies to put the rail in the right spot. So those were my three. Any other one want to jump in with top priorities, whether they're three or more? Councillor Mearns?
Yeah, just real quick, looking at 7.2.1 right down to 7.2.9, regional trail plan for many of the reasons Councillor Ostindi talked about. You know, there could be some economic benefit to that for the community and tourism, and the same for lake access points. And we hear about it quite often, about you know, different launches and free launches, etc. So I think those would be items that I would put along with the lake access management plan to have that all in one.
Councillor Parson?
Well, I like the setbacks to the tributaries, lake access management, and the regional trail plan. Those are my priorities in these ones, if we're going with three.
And just giving a bit of a pause here. Mayor Hanson?
Maybe just to process clarity. So is it that we'll be going back with just three, or is that we're providing kind of a ranking on them, or what exactly are we coming back to the table?
There wasn't a specific ask. It was just to bring back council's priority areas out of the short-term items. So we can do it however council feels most comfortable. Mm-hmm. I'm happy if there's 3 or 4, at least as a starting point. But if council feels like they'd want to rank all of them, we can definitely do that too.
I sort of introduced it with, mentioned 3 or 4. I'd picked 3, but I sort of said 3 or more, I think was my words, or 3 or 4. But maybe after we've got an initial sense, maybe there's more commentary to say. Councillor Dakin?
Yeah, I think protecting our lakes is very important. So the interim environmental significant areas mapping is a priority for sure. If we damage our lake, we're kind of hooped. Nobody wants to come here. The regional trail plan is another big one. With the trail plan, Mrs. Devlin, would it go like around the lake to the north as well? Because I think when I heard you say it would go Red Deer. Is that what I heard?
Potential other lakes is, they were,
Like would it go to
people
Gull
talked
Lake?
about.
Would it tie into like the Gull Lake?
I think the plan could go wherever the group would like it to go. It's anticipated to go at least a loop around, all the way around the lake.
Yeah.
And then connect from there. I know
Cool.
that I've been in several conversations about definitely connecting to Red Deer. The IDP did mention Benalto, but there's nothing saying it couldn't have a connection to Gull Lake as well.
And then in this one, would we be considering possibly, sorry for getting off on a tangent here, would we be considering possibly sledding trails as well, or no? Or are we just talking bikes, pedal bikes and
Non-motorized.
walking?
Cycling, pedestrians, yeah,
Thank
at
you.
this
Okay,
point.
still a priority for sure. And then my final two would be the launching. See, so just for clarity again, 7.2.4 has to take precedence before 7.2.7 and 7. The other ones. So they have to have a plan before they can, like access management plan. Do they not have a plan?
Yeah, my interpretation of that, I just brought that policy up again. Planning and development of additional formal motorized boat launch, planning and development of a new formalized non-motorized launch for closing the access points down. So the way I read this, it reads to me like the plan should come first before the launches, but there's nothing saying they couldn't be jointly done at the same time if there was enough funding to do both.
Then I'm saying together is one. Then that finishes me off.
Councillor Payne?
721, 724, and 827. Everything else ties for 4 for me.
What was the last one? 8-2?
Groundwater advocacy.
Okay.
I think this is something that's going to be bigger and bigger as we go on. Yeah. But regional trail plan, we've been having that conversation for ever. Lake access management plan seems like a no-brainer. It seems like everything else needs to be, kind of hinging on the access plans. And then groundwater, I really do think that that's a conversation that's just going to get bigger as we go forward. It's already a hot topic, so I don't think it's one that should slide off the table ever.
Mayor Hansen?
627A, 721, and 724 would be my 3. But I did start 6, so.
Can you run by those 3 again? 627A?
Yeah, 627A, 721, the regional trail plan, and then the lake access management plan.
Okay. So, Councillor Mearns?
Just for clarity on Councillor Payne's suggestion, 8.2.7, is that something that is happening already, like it's ongoing, or is that something that
Is that 8.2?
is not on, like, interpretation of that, I guess, is I'm looking for.
At this point, I'm not aware necessarily of, and for council's benefit, I can read that policy if you'd like to hear exactly what it says. Partner municipalities shall work together on advocacy initiatives in dialogue with the province of Alberta to encourage proactive watershed-based groundwater monitoring. Accurate and monitoring data would provide the municipalities with appropriate data to consider appropriate development regulations in the future. I'm not aware of groundwater advocacy that is happening currently. I think there's just discussion happening amongst the municipalities and back and forth between municipalities, we'll say. But I'm not aware that the group has not talked about any groundwater advocacy at this point.
Okay. How about Councillor Payne and Councillor Dakin?
The water cooler conversations, pardon the pun, with groundwater always seems to be between the county and everyone else who's not the county. you know, who's got access to the groundwater, who's using the groundwater. And I think that's a piece that, you know, there's already some conversations about, you know, how we are growing so quickly, how we're getting so big, you know, is it going to be a situation that is going to continue to be a big topic? And I really do think it is. And I think even though the advocacy is not happening right now, the conversations between the municipalities do happen. And I think it's a piece that if you're not prepared to, you know, go to bat for the situation, it's one that could become a hot topic issue that doesn't go anywhere. So, and as I've said, right now I think the biggest conversation is between everyone in the county and everyone who's not in the county and who's got access.
Councillor Dakin?
I think the groundwater conversation goes hand in hand with the water supply line. You know, if we have groundwater issues, then we're gonna have to have a water supply line. You know, to have the groundwater advocacy ongoing, but not have it actually going. I feel like it's not going, actually. So could we get it going? Could we have a real conversation around that?
We can definitely add it to the items for discussion when we go through this, both the immediate, and I think that's there might have been 2 ongoing, or is that the only one? No, there's 2. It was grants for trail building, which at one point was ongoing, and I haven't heard any conversations around that in several years now at this point, but we can definitely bring up the ongoing ones to see if we can shuffle them along to be going.
I'll just advocate for the name of the trail. It's got to be Kinnipick, which is the Cree name for our original place. Yeah, that's the one. I actually suggested that to the former mayor McIntyre years ago when we were talking about the Red Deer to Sylvan Lake Trail. I said we have to use the original name. The one policy area I didn't hear any priority to was the road allowance closure and reclamation. That one didn't hit the note for anybody particularly, not to say we don't believe it's important. But it seemed that we had the strongest interest in that lake access management regional trail plan, and then the others were, I'll call it phase or level 2 priorities, all the others. That's what I was hearing in my own ears. Is there anything else we should be discussing, Ms. Devlin, or giving you feedback on?
No, I think this gives me and hopefully the councillor that sits on the IDP committee enough information to have a valuable discussion the next time we meet.
Great, yeah.
When is the next time we will meet? I asked that question because I think over the last number of years, there's been very few meetings. Yeah, 1 meeting over many years. So I think that's been my other frustration with the process is there seems to be some pushback on even getting together. And it is really hard to make any groundwork when it is 1.5 years between meetings, unless we're doing this fairly regularly, so.
The last conversation I heard, they were looking at June, but I have not seen any dates come out. So tomorrow I will send an email and follow up now that we're all ready to go and see if they have a date pending.
And I'll say with my healthy dose of skepticism, if you're trying to get 8 elected officials together with 2 weeks notice, it probably is a deferral and then will be said based on scheduling. And I'd hate to see this go past the election, knowing that we also have a Summer Villages election taking place a month from now. So all of the parties will change. And there really is, we're starting from ground zero again, so.
I can add from my 1 year of experience on that committee, I sat in a meeting once and it was on the very last day of my appointment. So I was glad to have had one touch of it. But one thing that helps the IDP is if actions can come from the group, the technical committee, the staff members like Ms. Devlin can carry forward some of the work too. So hopefully once it functions and starts to get that political direction, then the technical committee can take on the professional direction and advance some of these projects. So, but it was slight frustration in my own mind too, that idea of how do we make progress as a partnership, because it is an award-winning plan. This plan, this IDP is award-winning and has some great stuff in it, but it will mean nothing if we don't act on it. So it'd be cool to see that. Seeing no other commentary, thank you, Ms. Devlin, and we now shift to number 4. I'm just double checking on our agenda. Council Committee and Event Reports, page 108, etc. Councillor Parsons, Mayor Henson, before we jump there.
I had an advocacy note that I forgot to mention because I wrote it on the side. And
Okay.
I was hoping I could include it within that. I just want to give an example from mid-sized cities that was really powerful to me. Both Airdrie and Leduc were looking at overpasses, was the example that they gave, and different projects, let me say. But the Airdrie overpass was a $65-ish million project is what I saw online, and provincial dollars was $29.6 million of that project. Leduc, similar project, different cost model, but 112 million total project, and 96.4 million was provincially funded. And the mayor of Leduc gave the great example of what was the difference between these two, because essentially they were the same in many ways. They were happening at similar times. And he was the squeakier wheel. There really is no other big difference. And really drilled home to me just how important it is that we put the time into moving our advocacy priorities forward, and that we really work on our plan to do this, and that we are the squeaky wheel on advocacy things, because I do believe it could mean the difference of many, many millions of dollars when we have grants in, if we are well aware and we're really meeting about that regularly. And I've learned some best practices from other municipalities that are doing it really well. And I would say we're starting to get on the railway track of doing that, but we have some more work to do. I'm excited to talk about it a little bit more in detail, but that example was fresh, just about how different the funding came in for something that had so many similarities. And that's really what he claimed was the difference.
Food for thought, to say the least. All right, moving to number 4, Council Committee and Event Reports. Councillor Parsons, any highlight on your report?
No, the report I had in there was basically the meeting I went to, and it's all explained in there.
Okay, thank you. And my reports, page 109, 114, I just want to highlight thinking about the hub and how we support individuals in our community. I am frustrated in some ways by our society's inability to get past the Band-Aid stage, where we are constantly thinking of shelters rather than housing, things as an example. So we do great work in our community, but we as a broader community never get to that next step to say we have solved some serious issues, and it came to light in my travels in Europe this spring, and coming back to Canada, I can see more homeless people in our own community if I look for them and open my eyes than I saw in 3.5 weeks travel in Europe. And certainly in Red Deer, I can see way more. The other highlight I want to make is that on the Cape work with the Transportation and Logistics Committee, the idea of a new corridor through the Rocky Mountains, I always thought that, you know, this is a 50-year-old conversation that might not go nowhere, it might not go anywhere, but a serious silver lining will be the partnerships of conversations that come up between communities. But it's strange things happen in our lives, and we are at a point in our history as a country where economic corridors are actually at one of the highest levels of conversation, and who knows what might happen. The silver lining may still occur, that new partnerships between communities, Indigenous governments, national parks, et cetera, come together and create economic opportunities. But actually, who knows? Maybe there will be economic corridors moving through another pass in the Rocky Mountains. Not that I say I love it on an environmental standpoint, but good things can be done if done thoughtfully. Those were my highlights from my reports. And Mayor Henson?
Just want to draw attention to the mid-sized cities ones, and the note around the number of municipalities within that group that have started doing bulk budgeting for their capital projects.
Oh, yeah.
It was something we talked about in past years, and it was great to see that there's a list that tried it this year. So basically, they put out their, they have an in-camera conversation with council, and that's where they review the line by line, that portion of the budget. They release the overall budget, and then when the RFP comes out, that's when they would make public how close or how far it was from the budgeting. And I'm not sure how much data they had, but 2 of those communities did verbally express that they have seen some things coming in under budget that may have come in anyways, but I would love to see us talk about that.
Ms. Phillips?
I did do it last year, so I have my template that Darren and I are gonna, Mr. Moore and I are going to have a conversation and see what he thinks of it, so, because I agree, yes. Yeah.
And then my, everything else is in there. The other one I just would like to ask is, the other reports, is there a way that we can just add a line that when we choose other from the drop-down, you can write the name of what it was? Because there's not a place for that. It can be an optional, because of course if you chose it from the drop-down, you wouldn't need to put anything in there, but then at least when you do, you've got a spot for it. You don't have to just guess. That's it. Thank you.
Just fewer others. Good point. Councillor Rilling is away. Any questions on her report from anybody? Otherwise, we can carry on to upcoming meetings and events. I always wondered, how do we qualify to be on these lists as events? Because there's always other things going on in the community, but these are our own town sanctioned, I believe. Is that correct? That we're not missing any others or ones we partner with? Okay. Any questions on those? Mayor Hansen?
I just wanted to confirm that chatting with council, we had Dakin, Payne, and Parsons confirmed. And please let me know if that is not the case.
That's for the June 5th one?
Yes, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Actually, I believe, you might have solved why I thought, oh, why am I yes on one and I'm on a maybe? I might be a maybe on that chatting, but I think I must just mess that up.
Fair.
So I was planning to be there tomorrow too.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, I believe we have reached the Edmonton Oilers games and the adjournment of this meeting. Thank you, everyone.